was born in the Northern California.
So welcome. Great to have you here, Cole. Thanks so much for fitting me in between the rides on the weekend.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and, yeah, what your role in cycling community and where you live, where you're located?
Sure. My name is Cole Rasmussen. I'm in Santa Rosa, California, North Bay. I've been up here now for about 14 years. And I'm actually, at this point, the president of the Red Peloton Cycling Club, our board of directors. So we're a local 501c3 nonprofit, mostly focusing on cycling advocacy in our area here. We do a lot of volunteering and donation of monetary funds to support other cycling related nonprofits such as the Green Acre Children's Home. We do some trash pickup, things like that. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I definitely want to come back to Red Peloton in more detail. I got some specific questions about that, and I am a member. I absolutely just love being on the team. But I wanted to start by just going, what's your first memory of a bike?
Yeah, I can't remember back that far, but I do remember, 5 or 6 getting a bike, and within the first couple, I got it for Christmas, and then the first couple of weeks I wore out the coaster brake doing slides and brake slides in the backyard. So then my dad had to drill out the frame and put in a canny brake for me. So that was pretty awesome. Like, that kind of set the tone for my early cycling career. Right? I had a pretty big sized backyard, so we were always riding around, and it was the 80s, right? So bikes were kind of our main freedom. And so a couple BMX bikes through the years, broke a few, getting, radical and making jumps in the backyard. And then stepped up to a mountain bike in middle school, and then was jumping that until the forks bent. It was actually one of the old, like, Huffy style sledgehammer or something like that. So my dad actually had to cut the stanchions out and get new steel tubes and weld those to the crown. And luckily it was all steel back then, right? It wasn't an aluminum crown or anything like that. So went ahead and updated that, and then really just spent my summers and after school riding around. I grew up in the South Bay in Campbell, and there was a lot of creek trails, and we would ride up to Los Gatos and Lexington Dam. And so we were just hours and hours of miles after school and on the weekends. And then I stepped up at some point to a Motive steel hardtail and went and bought one of the Manitou Magnum forks with the little elastomers and like 40 millimeters of travel, and didn't do any racing, but really just spent a tremendous amount of time riding around the area and rode to school quite a bit. And then, as many of us do, right, got into driving, and then parked the bike for quite a few years. I rode occasionally now and again, but driving was kind of my passion. And then I got into cars and working on hot rods and stuff like that. But after high school, I went to San Jose State working on my engineering degree, and then met a friend who we're still friends now. He lived in Morgan Hill at the time and worked at Sunshine Bikes. And he actually, Will Kabalak, got a job at Specialized in the helmet testing lab. And so they were looking for somebody to help out in the test lab, the component and frame test lab. So I actually got a job in college working at Specialized. So I was there for about 5 years, from like 2002 to 2006-ish. So.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it was super fun, eye-opening experience, kind of working in the industry. And up till that point, right, like, I didn't know much about how everything worked, but it was definitely an awesome experience. And at the time, Specialized was one of the very few bike companies in the United States that had their own testing equipment and test lab. Chris DeLuzio at some point had come over from Cannondale, and Cannondale had a really big advanced lab. And so he brought that concept and the push to really do a bunch of testing internally. And I remember we used to give tours to like the shops and our outside salespeople, et cetera. And we bought a bunch of early 3T carbon road handlebars. And our demonstration was we could grab those bars and break them by hand.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then
Yeah.
we would set up the original specialized carbon bars on the test rig where we had like 5-pound weights on them, and we would drop them from multiple different heights and the bars wouldn't break. Right. And so that was one of those things that really helps you have perspective on, you know, the amount of cheap components and fake components coming out of different areas of the world, right? Like definitely make sure you know where you're getting your components from and get them from reputable, good companies, because there's a lot of accidents and crappy components out there.
Yeah, that's so cool, and what a great experience to work at that and see that side of the industry.
Yeah, and Specialized is pretty famous for their lunch rides, and so, you know, real quickly you kind of get the bug and get back on the bike, and we would go out for lunch rides, and then eventually I got fit enough where we were riding from San Jose down to Morgan Hill, like commuting to work, ride at lunch, and then ride home. So back in the day we got pretty fit really quick. I remember every lunch ride, you know, was almost like a Cat 1, Cat 2 packed field criterium style where everyone knew all the routes and people were attacking and people spent so much time trying to like, hey, you know, let's work together today, right?
Yeah.
And it was so amazing to, you know, kind of see that and see all the pros coming in and out. So I would do lunch rides on the road bike, and then did a lot of mountain riding. They had a bunch of jumps and stuff in the back of the building, and, you know, we'd go out and do jumps. And so I started again racing a bunch of the gravity stuff, so downhill and dual slalom and stuff like that. Eventually got done with college and worked there for a little bit and was like, okay, you know, I should probably like do something with my degree. And a lot of the manufacturing for Specialized was in Taiwan and China, and I didn't really want to travel and be away from home as much as those other engineers were. So I got a job at another manufacturing company kind of closer to home and was like, oh, wow, this is boring. And I lasted about a year, and then I submitted my resume to Fox Racing Shocks in Watsonville, and they swooped me up pretty quick. And so then I started commuting over the hill and down into Watsonville, which is just south of Santa Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
And was working in the quality department there. And that was also really interesting because instead of being very specific for one brand or one company, now we were servicing and providing suspension for really all the top frame companies and bike companies, as well as, you know, the middle market, or what they kind of considered middle market suspension companies too. So it was really neat to now all of a sudden having my background with Specialized and seeing what they did and seeing how they designed their frames, now being able to kind of experience different companies and go to events and ride different frames and different things like that. So that was really really fun as well. Went to Interbike and got to go out in the desert and test all the different bikes and frames and stuff with our suspension. So that was really neat. We built a pump track in the back of Fox, so that was awesome. We'd have pump track parties out there. Mark Ware came and helped us design that, and we built that, so that was really fun. I didn't do too much more road racing with them, although I did do the Watsonville crit just because it was pretty close down there in the 4.5s. Crashed out of that race one time. And then with Fox, it was more just cyclocross and kept up with the gravity stuff, but eventually I was tired of getting hurt, you know, trying to go bigger and faster, a lot more opportunities for crashing.
So were you pretty active? So did you get, because you had mentioned that you were riding a lot as a kid and then got into kind of gave up riding when you started driving. When did you actually start racing? Was it in conjunction with working at Specialized, or was it?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got into that just because you were working in the industry and it was all around you.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely hard not to want to buy 10 bikes and ride every kind of bikes, bike style. And there was, so I did race a little bit of BMX before, but I think I had a few races and then my bike got stolen. And then, it was back to working to get another bike. And that's when I went to the mountain bike. But, a little bit of past experience, but yeah, really started to race quite a bit when I was with Specialized. And it was nice kind of being on really the factory, like internal team, because a lot of people that actually worked there raced as well, right? So a lot of guys that were on at the time, like the Cow Giant Strawberry road team, were our road product managers, or we would go testing with the tire guy, right, and just start looping the same trail with like 3 or 4 different tires, right, and just really do a bunch of feedback sessions and things like that. So it was a tremendous great time. And then we'd go to like Sea Otter, and because we worked there, right, we just kind of roll into the pits and hang out at the trailer. And Ned Overend knew my name at one point, so it was pretty awesome to kind of be in that environment and see all that excitement, because early 2000s things were pretty big still, right, and a lot of events and a lot of racing. So that was really awesome.
Yeah, that is so cool, just to be immersed in it, working around it all day, learning about the tech, but then being able to actually surrounded by people who are doing it on a daily basis. It's funny, when I was in bands in my 20s, and there was a place in St. Louis Music, that made music equipment, and so many of the musicians worked there. So, and there would always be amazing musicians with the guys who worked there. But so that must have been a really, really fun, just to be immersed in it like that all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And also at Fox too, because they did suspension for ATVs and side-by-sides. All the off-road trucks were down in Southern California and Santee and out in the desert. But every now and again people would come through for factory tours, and ultimately Fox Racing Shocks did the shocks for the Ford Raptor truck as well. So we actually kind of got a real education on building components for the automotive industry. So that was really, really cool as well. At one point, I, working for quality, got a chance to go out to Michigan and saw the Dearborn Ford Museum, and got to kind of hang around as we were submitting our documentation package to get approval for selling the suspension to Ford. So
very cool.
Yeah, definitely awesome.
I wanted to talk some about Red Peloton. First, I love the club. I love the team. And I was attracted to the team because in the area in Northern California here, people are saying, hey, if you want to be more competitive, this is the team you want to be with. But as I've been in the club now for 2 years, or on the team for 2 years, I'm so impressed with, I got to be at your presentation the other night, and it's just so impressive what the club, how it's organized and what it does. And so I want to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. So originally it started out as the kind of race team for NorCal Bike Sport in 2007. So a couple local guys wanted to essentially kind of cat up and start a race team. And, it a little difficult to do that without a shop. So usually people try to find a shop to partner with, and really that was kind of the impetus behind it. So Jonathan Lee and a few folks started the race team with Dave's Bike Sport. In 2009, it got to the point where they had enough people and they decided to turn it into a 501c3 nonprofit. And that essentially allowed them to now receive donations and get sponsors. And so really from kind of those early years, the focus was to, enable people to ride work towards racing, as well as supporting a lot of the local junior and kind of development racers, right? And so it kind of took off from there. And so, it's been going quite a while. There's still a handful of folks that were still riding and active with us that have been around since the beginning, which is really awesome. And so at this point, we're probably I don't want to say only race team, but definitely the most active and largest race and cycling focused club. There are a few other groups in town, but they've kind of dwindled in size over the years. And while we do have quite a few people that race, right, we're certainly not focused specifically on that. Whereas like the size of the club kind of dictates really what you can and can't do. So for example, the Santa Rosa Cycling Club has been around, I believe, I'll have to check this, since the 70s, right? And so, it's that very dedicated group that's kept it rolling, and they're actually large enough now that they put on their own events like the Terrible Two and the Wine Country Century, and that takes a tremendous amount of manpower. That's kind of the biggest thing that they focus on throughout the year. And so, we're still a little small. We're right around 70 members this year. And so for us, right, our focus is supporting and giving back to the community and being active in that way, right? We understand that, we don't have the manpower to put on a race yet, although we're looking to do that shortly, just because the few dedicated race organizers are, getting a little on the older side, and, it's harder to put on races if you don't have a larger club to kind of support and, help you afford that and have the volunteers and the manpower, right? And so that's where, I feel like Red Peloton's in kind of a really good spot, right? We're a medium size, we're still able to get a good group ride going, and, we support the two local teams in town, Team Swift and the Devout SciSip juniors. And so with the juniors, right, there's a lot of turnover as those kids kind of age up or lose interest. For us, we've kind of primarily been a masters or a, older demographic. And so a few years back, we kind of were looking at how we could continue to give back and support the riders that were graduating out of the junior teams or riding high school mountain bike and things like that. And really through our racing could see that a lot of the local kids were essentially going from having a team to riding solo and trying to earn their way up through the categories by themselves, which is super hard to do, especially, when there's 50 or 60 people in a race and there's, multiple teams that are employing tactics and things like that. And so a few years back, we had kind of a restructuring and a refocus, and, kind of worked very specifically to define and kind of ensure not only that the Red Peloton had a focus moving forward and sustainability from the inside out for the years to come, but, again, really looking at our strengths to determine how we could best support local riders and the younger folks coming up. And so we have set aside funding and parsed off some specific sponsors to kind of fund a very specific U23 program. And so with that, we have 5 riders that we've been able to support with race reimbursement, as well as some coach fee supplementation. We felt that having a coach was super important. If you weren't a superstar as a young rider and getting to, an elite level team right away, right, you need a few more years to develop and learn the racing craft, right, as well as really figure out how to be an adult, right?
Right.
You're out of high school, you're trying to figure out college, get a job, right? Things are crazy right now, and it's expensive to really do anything, right? So putting together kind of that focus and drive, leveraging the sponsors and kind of the horsepower that Red Peloton has in the racing community, we felt that it would be good to really kind of focus and, work on a program that supports those racers in that 19 to 23 age group. And it's actually been super successful over the last 2.5 years. Our goal is really just to be a sense of, or to provide a sense of stability and direction. We don't want to be just another parent like, hey, you need to help, go race and do your intervals. It's more like, hey, what do you want to do this year? What do you want to focus on? How can we help you? How can we, help you juggle or learn or talk through the process? And so Mike Charlton has been really instrumental in that. He's our U23 mentor. Really working with the younger guys that are coming up that, just 19 or just getting into kind of the broader race scene, right? It can be a little overwhelming. There's races on our Northern California district calendar now from, essentially February timeframe clear through September into October, right? So there's plenty of racing to be had, but unless you have the support and a team rallying with you or working together, it can be pretty overwhelming. And so we've graduated about 6 of the 10 riders that we have had onto what we consider kind of that next level, a domestic elite, like a Mike's Bikes or Volley Factory. We had a rider go race for Rio Grande, which is a continental domestic elite team out of Colorado. And it's been really great because we've, developed a rapport with these other teams, and, they kind of look to us like, oh, hey, you got any good prospects coming up, right? And so it's been really great to kind of define what we want to do and then become successful at that.
That's awesome. I mean, it's amazing. It's kind of, it blows my mind being on the team and not even being aware of how much the extent of everything you guys are doing. And that's so, I know going back from when I started racing in the 80s on the St. Louis Cycling Club, there was a guy, Craig Farrell, that he was, all the juniors were showing up at his house at like 3:30 after school. And I mean, I knew it was pretty cool at the time, but looking back at how instrumental that was, just anything where you've got that support system, even as simple as going out on a ride and you got a buddy you're riding with, you always ride better. And obviously having the support of a club that's helping lead and coach and provide resources to the U23 riders. I know they've had lots of multiple fundraisers where they'll reach out to club members to support. I know the trip to Europe. So it's just awesome. I love that the club's doing that.
Yeah. And it's, and that's kind of, you bringing up the fundraising, and it's a great point. Like, that's something new that we've decided to do this year, right? So originally we're like, hey, how can we just kind of keep some of these folks racing? And now we're at the point where it's like, okay, if we want to help these riders get a leg up, what do their race resumes need to look like for some of these, bigger or paid teams to say, oh, hey, that's somebody that we would be interested in, especially nowadays where there aren't many teams looking for new riders and there's not much sponsorship money and there's really not a lot of racing at that pro elite level, right? And so in order to do that, we've made the decision to kind of start working towards sending our riders to stage races or national championships, U23 national championships, things of that nature. We're trying to fundraise a little more so that we can, send our racers down to do bigger stage races like Redlands or a Tour of Murrieta, things like that, right? And so the trip to Belgium is new for us this year, working with Sean Wilson out of Southern California, who runs the Team California Junior and U23 program. He saw and has heard what we're doing up here and was like, hey, every summer we send a group of kids out to Belgium, right? Like the heart of European racing, where essentially there's people and racing so big in the culture there that like people set up their houses like for an Airbnb. They buy a van and have people show up. You pay for the house and your own food. And like this guy, Greg, that we're working with, is essentially, his job now is to take the racers that show up all around Belgium into France and into other local areas to do races, and they call them kermesses there. So it's basically a 2 to 3 hour crit through the local towns, right? Just super intense, 150 plus riders in every field. And so a lot of kind of our current crop of professionals like Eddie Huntsman, who races for Butcher Box, goes out there, right? And he'll spend a month in Europe basically racing these super intense races. And it's essentially like the equivalent of, like every other day, the small towns around this area are all doing races, right? And the whole town shuts down. Everybody's out screaming and yelling, watching 5 or 6 hours worth of races through all the different categories. And it's just phenomenal experience. And it's honestly one of those things where if you get a chance to do it, it really helps you with that perspective and helps you understand like what it takes to be a professional cyclist, right? Like it's not just racing 45-minute crits, because beyond the United States, there's not much crit racing, right? You get into road racing and time trials or the track, right? And it is ingrained in European society from a young age, right? Like, they're not just riding their bikes to school, they're like serious about racing. And so in order to really kind of provide that level of experience and life-changing perspective for our riders, we're, crowdfunding at this point, to get some extra support. It looks like we'll have about 2 waves. And again, because the racing in California, Northern California, is pretty big, there's quite a few teams, and we essentially race with all the same folks every weekend almost, for the broader majority of the calendar. We usually kind of reach out and try to find other people that want to head out as well. And so from that perspective, it's nice to be like, hey, we're putting together a group to go out in June. We have 2 or 3 slots left, who wants to go. So it's been kind of an exciting preparation getting ready for that this year.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, what a great experience. Jeff Rosh was one of the riders I met through Craig Farrell's St. Louis Cycling Club camps. And he probably, as far as all the riders I know, I mean, a lot of them did impressive stuff. He probably has done the most, but I remember he in the 80s went over to Belgium and raced over there. And that was the place to go then. So very cool. That's so awesome. And you guys are supporting all that. What else? Oh, I wanted to mention talking more about the club. I don't know if you wanted to talk about the collaboration with Santa Rosa Cycling Club.
Yeah. So again, looking at where we are and what we want to try and do, both with the U23 team and the TNTs, and we can touch on those as well. But really partnering with Santa Rosa Cycling makes sense at this point, right? We want to really do better and do more. And so it makes sense to connect with a bigger group that has a broader reach. They're over 1,000 members at this point, right? And so that's a tremendous opportunity for us to link with them and, kind of just do a better job with kind of our Sonoma County cycling community, right? We have a tremendous amount of talent that has kind of come up and come through here between Levi and Pete Stetna and with Luke Lamperti, right, who's currently racing for blanking out. Soudal, Quick Step, whatever their name is this year, right? And so between the events and the riders that have come out of this area, right, like it is just tremendously great riding. And so we wanted to really broaden that and be able to provide more support to, you know, younger athletes and provide more support to our junior teams, as well as, you know, support things like the Sonoma County Bike Coalition, who really does the majority of the work when it comes to working with the municipalities and getting bike lanes and safer areas in our downtown districts, right? And really those are the things that we by ourselves can't go do, but when we connect and link up with them, right, now we have kind of that broader reach. And, you know, the Bike Coalition says, hey, we need people to come out and support this type of event, or we're talking to the town of Windsor about, you know, new bike lanes and what are the most popular routes, you know, for a lot of our rides, and, you know, how do we integrate those discussions when towns are looking at expanding, right? And so who better to connect with than the actual people that are out there riding a lot, right? And so it's broadening our cycling horizons. And so, you know, partnering with Santa Rosa Cycling Club just definitely makes sense. And the Wine Country Century is actually just a fantastic event that draws, you know, thousands of people from all over California and beyond to really see what I consider some of the best riding, you know, in California. We're going from the beautiful coast on Highway 1 through the wine country, through the rolling hills, the Russian River Valley, right? It is tremendous roads, you know, as you know well. So, you know, in order to really kind of focus and move forward as the Red Peloton, right, and do the things we want to do, partnering and working on sponsorship opportunities and, you know, reaching to that bigger cycling community here is really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And it really makes sense. First of all, we're really fortunate to have multiple, there are, even though you've mentioned some have gotten small, there's still lots of options for teams and for people and clubs for people to join. And when I first got back, when I was getting back into cycling in 2020, I joined Santa Rosa Cycling Club, and it was a great to be a part of it. And I'm still a member. And and then I know there's a lot of people like me that are, you know, Juliana, John, lots of my friends that started there like me and now are also in Red Peloton, and a lot of people that remain in both. And I'm happy to see the partnership and as part of lots of efforts to continue to improve cycling in the community.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I think we all kind of have our specialities, right? And we all have different group rides, and I think we're all encouraging and opening, right? And a lot of times it just takes kind of finding your community or finding a few folks to really help make things easier, right? When you're getting into something new. And really cycling is great for that, right? Because everyone, for the most part, who cycles is really a good person. They know the benefits, right? It just makes you a healthier, happier person in general, right? And so the more people we can get on bikes, the better.
Yeah, this life drifts like waves to know the secret shores. Yeah, this life drifts like waves